here at the Independence Reformed Bible Church. We allow for questions following the morning message. Who has a question this morning? Yes.
Can you expound on your enemies might not be Christ's enemies? And then I can either give you the follow-up question now or when you're done with
Yeah.
that.
Okay, love. Question was, can I expound on my enemies might not be Christ's enemies? I heard actually Tim Yarbrough speaking on this a little while ago. And he said he made a point that I actually hadn't thought of as one of those simple points. That, like, why? How can I figure this out? He said, if you're going to love your enemies, what is one thing you're going to have? That would be enemies, right? You have to have enemies. And you and I are going to have enemies throughout our lives. That's just the way it is. But just because they're my enemies doesn't mean that they're Christ's enemies. We might have a dispute over a piece of land. Someone that said they would do something for me and didn't do it. They believe they did it right. Paul talks about lawsuits there in 1 Corinthians. Lawsuits, definitely, I mean, two people on the same side, a different side of a lawsuit within the church, where he calls on the church people to solve the lawsuit. In that sense, they're enemies of each other. They both want justice. They're defining justice differently. And this person is on the other side of it. This person is standing between me and justice. That doesn't mean that person is an enemy of Christ. I always go, as I mentioned before, I might have mentioned this before even recently, to Psalm 139. I think I mentioned it last week. Psalm 139, where David says,
Verse 19.
I'll read it. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. Depart from me, therefore, men of bloodshed. They speak against you wickedly, and your enemies take your name in vain. Do not I hate those who hate you, O Lord? Do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with the utmost hatred. They have become my enemies. And then he says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Meaning, help me, I believe, with that prayer that he prays. He makes a statement that I hate those who hate you. Your enemies are my enemies. And then the prayer. We have the statement, then the prayer. And the prayer is that I believe, he says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts. And see if there be any hurtful way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way. So I believe what he's doing is he's offering a prayer that he will be able to identify the difference between his enemies and God's enemies there. Search me, O God, know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. See if there's any wicked way in me, because I'm that concerned that I will be the enemy of God. Because I will be an enemy of God if there are wicked ways in me, because God is that much opposed to wickedness. And you had I hope that answers it somewhat.
Yeah, that does, but then the follow-up question, or question B, was when you have professing Christians who teach things that are what we would call completely pagan ideas. Maybe the Old Testament is no longer relevant, or things like that. Are they both enemies, or they're professing Christians? It's really difficult in today's society to make those distinctions, and we're very quick nowadays to anathematize people. But how do we know that they are Christ's enemies?
Well, I think we start the way. How do we identify that guy there is the enemy of Christ? Some are easy. The men I mentioned earlier today, they're easy. And I think Seth had a great point about Christopher Hitchens, a man who really cursed Christ with his mouth. And then I don't know if people were praying prayers against him or not, but interestingly enough, the man dies of cancer of the mouth and the tongue. He used his mouth to curse Christ. That's what gets attacked in the end, and he died. It actually looked kind of pretty horrible, the way he finally went. I believe we start this way, the way David does here. He's not naming people here. He's saying whoever they are. And I believe that's what distinguishes what we pray versus what pagans do. Pagans, they think they can identify everybody. They identify their own enemy, then they get a doll of their enemy, they stick pins into it. We don't do that. We ask God to judge his enemies, whoever they are. I think there's some that we can identify and there's some that we can't. And I think that's one of the reasons why David here does not identify who they are. He says, whoever they are, I hate them. I don't even know them, but I hate them anyway. Come on, you got to like David for that, right? You got to like the guy. Anybody who hates God, I hate. I don't even know him. You got to like him for that. And so I think that's where we start. Now, there's a lot to this that I'm not. For example, Paul prays in imprecatory prayer against Alexander the coppersmith, you might remember. He says, and this is more personal, and this is a little bit harder for me to figure out. He says, Alexander the coppersmith did me much evil. The Lord reward according to his works. That's an imprecatory prayer right there. Give Alexander coppersmith whatever he gave to me. But I think Paul there is so confident that he was doing the work of Christ that anybody that opposed what he was doing was opposing the work of Christ. So then that puts the emphasis back on you and me. Are we really doing the work of Christ, or are we doing some other work? Because we have lots of enemies that get in the way of our work. But if we're doing the work of Christ, it seems to me, and we know it, we can pray like Paul did. There's a lot to this, and there's not enough, I believe, talked about this. There's not enough theology developed about it because, my guess is most of us here have never been involved in a Bible study where we study this type of praying. I know I took courses in college, and we never really identified the type of prayers as being prayed. I took last things in college, I took Revelation in college, and I don't ever remember talking about what exactly these prayers were in Revelation chapter 8. And I believe Revelation chapter 6 tells us exactly what those prayers were. How long, O Lord, will you not avenge? Questioning. Well, I want to thank you this morning for your kind attention.